Greetings people, 'tis I, 480 Volts, and welcome back to another episode of 480 Reviews. Earlier this year, I looked back at a childhood favorite of mine and many other 90s kids like myself, a little game called Crash Bandicoot for the PlayStation 1. Today we are going to be taking a look at my favorite video game of all time, Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. Now before we get into the specifics, let me take you on a journey through the complex web that is my childhood memories. Imagine, it's the year 1998. You take out your copy of Crash 1, which you still have a desire to play despite the fact that you have died multiple times in stages like Sunset Vista and Slippery Climb, causing you to throw down your controller in a fit of rage and declare that this game is stupid and you'll never play it again. You open your Greatest Hits Edition jewel case. As your hand reaches for the disc, your eyes dart over to the left side of the case where Crash is grinning back at you on the back side of the instruction booklet, surrounded by in-game images of a supposed sequel and a message, "He's back! And this time he's going to run, jump, crawl, slide, belly flop, swing, surf, fly, and more in a whole new stunning adventure. More hidden bonuses, more secret paths, and more challenging puzzles than ever. All new moves and combos, bigger levels, all new enemies. It's a 3D action-packed dream come true. Available November 97. Can it be true, you ask yourself? Can there really exist a sequel to this awesome game? Too bad you'll never know the joy of experiencing it, or so you think, as video games do cost money, and as your parents have reminded you, such a thing does not grow on trees. Then comes the day of your dreams. Your mother and sister make a trip to the local Blockbuster and return with a rental copy of Crash Bandicoot 2 Cortex Strikes Back. You can play it later, your mom tells you. Right now it's time for lunch. Lunch? Are you kidding me? How can you think about lunch at a time like this? You finally manage to scarf down your food, and you and your brother and your sister gather around the TV and insert the game into the PlayStation. You know what? Since we're going for full-blown nostalgia here, there we go. Now it's 1998. The game opens with Crash flying around with a jetpack and flipping outer space while your ears are greeted by that familiar sound that all Crash players know. You choose new game and your adventure begins. Everything that you couldn't have ever dreamed possible is here. A story that picks up right where the last game left off, better graphics and animations, awesome new music, full-on voice acting, the return of old friends like Ripperoo and Dr. Embryo, collecting gems and stages despite the fact that you have died in said stages, being able to save your game at virtually any time you want. Okay, I think we're done with the nostalgia trip for now. Let's get back into the groove, beginning with the story. The game opens right where we left Dr. Cortex at the end of the last game, which was a first-hand experience on the effects of gravity. Surviving the fall, Cortex awakens in a room filled with glowing crystals. Believing these crystals to hold powerful energy, he retrieves one for study at his lab, or at least that's what the instruction booklet said. In the actual game, we just got this cutscene.
Crystals. Of course.
Oh, that's it. About a year later, Cortex and his new buddy, Dr. Engine, have constructed a giant space station shaped suspiciously like a giant ray gun that just happens to be pointed right at Earth. Engine informs Cortex that in order for this installation to do whatever it's supposed to do, they'll need 25 more crystals like this one. Problem is, Cortex and Engine are the only two guys managing all of this. All of Cortex's former lackeys have deserted him, and since they don't have any minions to send down to Earth to collect crystals, and since Cortex is too lazy to look for them himself, he decides to recruit his nemesis from the previous game, Crash Bandicoot himself. That's like a whole new level of laziness, getting your sworn enemy to do something that you don't feel like doing. Crash is chilling out getting some shut-eye in the jungle fields while his little sister Coco is typing away on her laptop computer. Not having much battery power left, she asks Crash to go fetch her a power supply. I guess she's too lazy to get it herself. Wow, everyone's lazy in this game except the one who actually just wants to nap in the sun all day. On his way back to the house, Crash is suddenly warped into a mysterious chamber filled with portals, while a holographic projection of Cortex appears and tells him to go through said portals and collect the crystals. And, well, Crash does just that. As you collect more crystals, Cortex gives you more info, basically telling him that the world is in danger and the crystals are the only means of salvation, but yeah, for that first initial crystal, Crash just sort of jumps in because Cortex tells him to. Cortex claims that the planets are about to align, all 13 of them. Oh yeah, you know, all 13 planets in our galaxy. and this will create a power great enough to rip the Earth apart because apparently that's a thing somehow, and the crystals can be used to absorb and contain this energy. Crash traverses through 25 stages spread across 5 warp rooms, plows through numerous enemies and obstacles, and collects crystals while receiving additional hints from Cortex and Coco, who suspects that Cortex may not be telling the entire truth here. Oh really? What could possibly lead you to that conclusion? Once all crystals have been collected, it is revealed that Cortex was lying through his teeth the entire time and simply needed the crystals to power up a machine on his space station called the Cortex Vortex, which according to Coco
will cover the entire world, turning everyone into Cortex's mindless slaves.
Crash then chases Cortex down through outer space and defeats him, and then goes back to napping out in the sun until Coco reminds him that the Cortex Vortex is still a thing, thus giving us the incomplete ending of the game. However, as was the case in the first Crash title, there are gems to collect in this game, 42 to be exact, and these gems are sought after by one Dr. Nitrous Brio. It turns out that Brio and Cortex have apparently had a falling out since the events of the last game. In fact, Cortex tells Crash that Brio is the mastermind behind the enemies who are trying to prevent Crash from collecting crystals. Brio even says that he will use all possible means to stop us, so one can assume that all of the bosses we face, with the exception of Dr. N. are working for Brio. Once all 42 gems have been collected, Brio uses the energy to power up another giant ray gun, this one built on the planet's surface and pointing into space, and obliterates the Cortex Vortex, thus giving us the complete ending. However, the end of the credits are marked with Cortex's signature evil laugh, indicating that he will be back one day. The story isn't really anything special, but I will admit that as a kid I was somewhat captivated by it. I remember wondering if Cortex was going to do good on his word to try and save the world, or was he just trying to pull the wool over our eyes? Looking back at it now, over 20 years later, yikes, has it really been that long? I can see that the clues were pretty obvious. Dude wanted to conquer the world in the last game, but now wants to save it. Dude occasionally almost slips up and tells us things he doesn't mean for us to hear.
And my our enemies.
Dude blatantly lies about Brio's role in the last game.
He forced me to assist him in his plot for world domination.
And need I remind everyone that the game itself is called Cortex Strikes Back. Now admittedly, the possibility of Cortex being the good guy was more believable than, say, Dr. Wily from Mega Man games, mainly for the fact that this was only the second game. In my opinion, if he's been the villain twice, then it's probably safe to assume he's the villain all of the time. Cortex as a villain isn't really anything special. Neither is Brio, but I do like the idea that the villain's top lackey from the previous game is now fighting against him in this game. Nice to see the dude growing a spine. The first boss you face is Ripperoo, who seems to have a serious fetish for explosives like TNT and nitro crates. I'm assuming that he's part of Brio's army, but to be honest, I've always seen this guy as his own random element, not really being on anyone's side. The rest of them are completely new characters. The Komodo brothers are a pair of samurai masters. Tiny the Tiger is indeed a tiger, but not tiny by any means. The only one who doesn't make sense to me as a boss is Dr. N. Why is he attacking us? He's working for Cortex. Cortex tells us to deliver the crystals to him, and then we're thrown into a battle with him. What gives? As a kid, I could only assume that Crash did not trust him or did not wish to relinquish the crystals just yet, and 20 years later, I cannot think of a better explanation. I do like the dude's design and backstory though. Apparently, he experiments with nuclear missiles, one of which hit him in the head. He then had robotic and cybernetic technology integrated into his body, the power supply of which being the very missile that remains lodged in his head. Crash's little sister Coco is the one we really need to watch out for. She seems innocent enough, a much more kid-friendly replacement for Tawna, who is completely absent from this adventure, but
I hacked into Cortex's computer.
You hacked into Cortex's computer files? Oh yeah, you know, just felt like it. I was bored, had some spare time on my hands. Feeling cute, might hack into the computer files of an evil genius later on, I don't know. I remember as a kid thinking about how technologically advanced Coco was. I mean, she had her own laptop. Back in 1997, that just wasn't something that little girls commonly had. And again, it's worth mentioning the lab assistant, who returns in many different forms in this game. He even has his signature scream from the last game. That's all I have to say about story. Let's get into the gameplay. The level design and platforming mechanics are similar to that of the first Crash game. Pretty much everything that the first game did was done better this time around. Crash controls basically the same way as he did last time, but with a few tweaks. His controls seem just a little less stiff than in the first game. He was by no means a tank in the first game, but he just feels a little more responsive this time around. He has some new moves used in conjunction with the circle button. Pressing the circle button while standing still lets him crouch. Moving around on the D-pad while holding the circle button lets him crawl on his hands and knees, allowing him to squeeze through some tight spaces. Pressing the circle button while already running allows him to slide like Mega Man. Not only does this get him under tight spaces, but it is also a means of attack similar to the spin, which returns in this game as well. Pressing the circle button and then jumping causes Crash to perform a high jump, and pressing the circle button in mid-jump allows Crash to perform a ground pound attack. Like the first game, there are many different types of enemies, most of which can be dealt with by any attack method, however some can only be dealt with by certain attacks. Wumpa Fruit and crates return in this game and work exactly as they did in the first game. Introduced in this game are Nitro Crates. Don't touch Nitro Crates. These do count as breakable crates, however, and if you're trying to break every single crate in a stage, then you'll need to do something about Nitro Crates. Be on the lookout for a green crate marked with an exclamation mark. Hitting this will cause every single Nitro Crate in that particular stage to combust, or, you could just hit them yourself provided you have sufficient Aku Aku masks to keep you alive. Another new crate introduced in this game are the wood crates with metal frames that you can only break by ground pounding. There's quite a few high jump puzzles used with these crates. The stages are spread across 5 different warp rooms, each with 5 stages, giving you a total of 25 main stages, plus a boss fight between every warp room and 2 secret stages, which I'll talk about later. When you first enter a warp room, you can play through each of the 5 stages in any order that you prefer. Then, once you've completed these stages, you'll face a boss on your way to the next warp room. Once you've beaten the boss, you can pass between warp rooms without having to face a boss, but if you wish to fight him again, just press and hold the triangle button on your way to the next room. The best thing about the warp rooms is that you can actually save your progress between stages or load up other files, as opposed to the first game in which you had to go through a really stupid song and dance just to save your game. As for the stages themselves, they're more of the same platforming goodness we've come to expect from the first Crash game. Interestingly enough, every stage opens and ends inside a special teleport chamber that is always in a 3D perspective, so every stage opens and ends in 3D. Some stages spend most of the time in 2D, while a few work back and forth between 2D and 3D, but no stages are entirely in 2D anymore. Some memorable tropes return from the first game, such as running from a giant boulder or riding on the back of an animal, in this case a polar bear cub, through a rail stage. A few new tropes include motorboarding through swamp sections, hanging from sewage grates, and of course flying around in zero gravity with a jetpack. I'm gonna be honest, the jetpack stages are my least favorite. The controls just feel really awkward to me, very stiff and sometimes glitchy. It didn't happen in this run-through, but I have memories of a kid getting stuck to certain walls during these stages. It also doesn't help that the final boss is based on this gimmick, although I swear the controls are more responsive during that battle, but that could just as easily be the level design itself. Like the first game, there are many different stage types throughout the game: jungle stages, snow stages, swamp stages, sewer stages, space station stages, etc., and they're used multiple times. In fact, while Crash 1 had 5 stage types that were completely unique and only used once, this game has none. Every single stage type is reused at least once. Now, to be fair, the game does a good job including some unique gimmicks throughout one stage that differentiates it ever so slightly from other stages of that type. For instance, there are 4 jungle stages, but Turtle Woods is the only one in which it rains, and Night Flight and Totally Fly take place at night and use the Firefly mechanic, in which you have to use a firefly to illuminate the area around you so you can see where you're going. There are 3 stages in which you are being chased by something, however, Unbearable is the only one in which it is a giant polar bear, as opposed to a giant boulder like in Crash Dash or Crash Crush. While the beehives and digging it only send 1 bee at a time to smite you, Behaving sends you swarms of bees. Even though Barrett, Bear Down, and Totally Bear involve Crash riding on the back of his little polar buddy, they take place at different times of the day, with Barrett seemingly in the morning or midday, Bear Down during sunset, and Totally Bear at midnight. And sometimes certain stages combine elements from other stages that just sort of fit. If you notice, Diggin' It and Behaving take place in the same sort of melting snow setting as Crash Dash, Crash Crush, and Unbearable, so they contain some of the same obstacles like the electric barriers, speed arrows, and step mines. As Night Flight and Totally Fly take place at the end of midnight, they feature some of the same nighttime enemies from Road to Ruin and Ruination. And in Unbearable, Crash once again mounts on the back of his polar buddy and rides through the last chase section. I like this, it keeps the stages from getting too stale. Interestingly enough, this game has an intro stage. It's based off the jungle motif and is technically optional, as skipping the opening cutscene skips the stage altogether. If I have anything to complain about the level design, it's that the platforming doesn't seem as intense as it was in Crash 1. It's still challenging enough, but it just doesn't feel as demanding of your A game as Crash 1. That's a small complaint, however, it may not apply to everyone playing. Now, the main thing you're supposed to do is not simply reach the end of the stage, but to collect the crystal that lies somewhere in the stage. These crystals are usually plopped somewhere in the middle of the stage in plain sight, so you should never have trouble finding them. To get the complete ending, simply collect all 25 crystals and beat the final boss. Nothing too special, but like the first Crash game, there are gems to collect, and this game takes the gem collecting concept to a whole new level. In Crash 1, every stage had a gem the requirements to collecting rating being that you reach the end of a stage without losing a life and breaking every single crate in said stage. For this game, the don't lose a life requirement has been dropped, so you can die as many times as you want in a stage, provided you don't get a game over, and still be eligible to collecting the gem. Gems are actually tangible this time, much like the crystal, so even after you've broken every crate, the burden is still on you to actually touch the gem. Don't worry, you can't not touch it unless you're really trying to. The gem will be located at the end of the stage within the teleport chamber, which is remarkably narrow. It'd be almost impossible to miss. If you have not broken every single crate, in the gem's place will be a holographic projection telling you how many crates you did break and how many are actually in the stage. Additionally, you can see how many crates you have broken at any time by pressing the triangle button. However, there are a total of 42 gems in this game, and you may recall me mentioning only 2 secret stages in addition to the main 25, so where did those 15 other gems come from? Well, as it turns out, 15 of the 25 stages have 2 gems to collect. Every single stage has that one gem that you collect by breaking all of the crates, but those 15 have a second gem, which you must collect by some other means. This is where the game gets creative. Most of the time, the secondary gem is found in a secret or hidden area of a stage, although there are a few instances in which you must do something special to receive the gem. For example, the secondary gems of both Hang 8 and Plant Food require you to reach the end of the stage within just over a minute. You don't have to break any crates or anything, just get to the teleport chamber as fast as you can. And some stages have hidden or secret areas that don't contain gems but more crates, which you'll need for that stage's primary gem. And just like in Crash 1, there are special detours you can take after you've collected special color gems. There are only 5 colored gems this time around. The orange gem has been dropped. Also, every single primary gem is a clear gem. If you're in a stage that has a colored gem path and you don't have that colored gem, in its place will be the outline of said colored gem. The gem pathways themselves generally take you on a somewhat lengthy detour filled with more hazards and obstacles than ever, and always return you to the main part of the stage, whether in the exact same area or in a different section, except for the final stage Spaced Out, the gem detour of which leads you to a second teleport chamber in which the secondary gem is located. Some of these detours contain extra crates, while others contain that stage's secondary gem. There is no stage like the Great Hall from the first game, however, the secondary gem of Spaced Out is found in a detour that requires all 5 color gems to traverse. While in the warp room, you can see what types of gems to expect from a stage just by looking at the markings above the portal. For instance, I can see that the blue gem is found in Turtle Woods and the red gem in Snowgo. I can see that Hang 8 contains 2 clear gems, while the Pits and Crash Dash only contain 1. Introduced in this game are the Skull Root platforms marked with a skull and crossbones. Nothing creepy about that at all. There's about 6 stages with these such platforms. Stepping on one causes it to carry you into a hidden area, much like the color gems, filled with more obstacles and hazards. Again, some of these areas contain more crates to break, others the secondary gem, and in still others, both. Again, most of these detours lead back to the main part of the stage, but a few of them lead you to a second teleport chamber. The big gimmick about these platforms is that if you lose a life in that stage before stepping on the platform, it will become an outline and will be unavailable until you've exited and re-entered the stage. So there is still something of a don't lose a life mechanic in place here. Now don't worry, it's not nearly as unforgiving as Crash 1. For one thing, these platforms are only in a small handful of stages. For another, the don't lose a life mechanic is only in place until you've stepped on the platform. Once Crash's feet have touched that platform, even if you jump off before it starts moving, you can lose a life as many times as it takes to not get a game over, and the platform will still be there. And I seem to remember as a kid that the don't lose a life mechanic didn't even go into effect until you'd broken the first checkpoint. However, I have not tested this in years, so don't quote me on that one. All in all, I like the Skull Root platforms. It's a good way of keeping some of that don't lose a life mechanic without making the entire game seem unforgivingly cruel. However, a few stages like Cold Hard Crash and Piston in a Way can get a bit tedious, as you need to do some backtracking through the main and or Skull Root sections to get everything. All of what I've mentioned still doesn't account for all of the secrets in this game. If you're going for a 100% ending and trying to collect all 42 gems, you're really going to have to go everywhere and touch everything. And you're going to have to do some stuff that seems to go against the innate rules and foundations that are established in the game itself. For example, to acquire every primary gem, you must break every crate. That is the standard that has been set. However, in an ironic twist, the secondary gem of the very first stage, Turtle Woods, the blue gem, requires that you reach the teleport chamber without breaking a single crate in the stage. Nitro crates. They're volatile, they bounce up and down wildly, and they explode in your face when you touch them. Everything about them says stay away. And that is exactly why Behaving holds a secret path that you must access by climbing atop a series of nitro crates, or more accurately, metal crates that have been painted to look like nitro crates but are completely harmless to you. And my all-time favorite ironic secret lies at the bottom of a pit in Unbearable. You know, this is a platformer. Falling down pits is something you generally try to avoid, but this is one pit you actually want to take a nosedive in. And then there's the secret warp room. In 5 specific stages, you may accidentally stumble across hidden teleporters. There's almost no indication of them whatsoever aside from the fact that they're usually on some random platform that surely wouldn't be placed there without a good reason. These teleporters will take you to a 6th warp room, one that possibly sits atop warp room 5, where one of 5 portals will be active, whichever portal itself being determined by whichever route you took to get here. 2 of these portals lead to new stages, Totally Bare and Totally Fly, each of which contains one gem, while the other 3 lead to a secret area in the stages of Snow Go, Air Crash, and Road to Ruin, in which you can grab some more crates or secondary gems. One of the most satisfying memories I have is the fact that I, my brother, and my sister discovered each and every one of these secrets despite how well hidden they were. Keep in mind, we didn't really have the internet back then, or at least not nearly on the same scale as we do today. We really did have to discover these secrets ourselves. The game does a wonderful job at giving you subtle hints after blatantly showing you that there is more to discover if you take the time to look. For example, in Hanging Out, you drop down to this area in the main path. Of course, the natural thing to do before taking the obvious path forward is to have a look behind you to see if maybe there's 1 or 2 crates back there. Well, there's no crates, but there is a whole nother section to explore with a trail of 1-ups to lure you in. Keep walking and whoop, invisible teleporter, welcome to the secret warp room. Once I had made this discovery and realized that invisible teleporters were a thing, I started looking for anything in any stage that might look a tiny bit suspicious. My mind immediately went to Air Crash, where this random platform is just sitting there, and yep, that leads to the secret warp room in a hidden area in Snow Go that rewards me with the red gem. The ground rules have been set. The game has made it clear that it wants me to explore and use my imagination and think outside the box. So here I am in the eel deal and, random small room with 1 wooden crate surrounded by a bunch of nitro crates. Now the wooden crate is literally right there. Why bother decking the rest of the room out with nitros? There's no reason to try and reach the wall at the end of this minefield, or so they want you to think. Oh look, that's a fake wall, and this is another secret detour that leads me to the green gem. After stumbling through enough secrets like this, I begin to look at each stage with a different perspective. I would start each stage with the question in my mind, what does this stage have that it doesn't want me to know about? I really do think the most obscure secret of all has to be the hidden detour in an Unbearable, because jumping down the pit goes against the very nature of Crash platforming. I really don't know how I managed to discover that one. It wasn't by accident. I deliberately jumped down there to see if something might happen. I'd done the normal part of the stage several times before and had broken every visible crate and still came up short, so I knew there was a secret around here somewhere. I suppose the second boulder stage in Crash 1 should have come to my mind, being that that stage had a gem that took you down into a big pit like this one. Honestly, I think what prompted me to jump down there was the fact that in the previous 2 chase stages you would occasionally see the boulder roll across this wooden bridge, breaking every single board and eventually falling down the pit, but this polar bear leaves 3 boards intact before falling down. That gave me the idea that this pit was different from the rest. Moving on, there are also bonus rounds in this game that are similar in concept to the bonus rounds of Crash 1, but handled quite a bit differently. There's no 3 emblems to collect, no special summon waiting for you at the end, and this is not how you save your game. In your average stage, you will find a platform with a question mark on it. This platform will lead you to the bonus round, a small area in 2D filled with Wumpa Fruit, 1-ups, and crates. These crates actually count to the overall total of crates in that stage, so if you're trying to get all the gems in this game, you need to complete these sections. None of them are terribly difficult, and if you die, you just get booted back to the main stage where you can re-enter the bonus round and try again. You won't even lose a life, although you will lose any Aku Aku masks you may have had. The crates, 1-ups, and Wumpa Fruit of the bonus stages are kept on their own special counter that is separate from your main counter of total collectibles, and if you wipe out in the bonus rounds, you lose everything that you had collected here. But if you make it to the end, the bonus total will be added to your own total. The bosses are nothing too special. Like in the first game, just figure out what hurts and roll with it. The Komodo brothers seem pretty cool in concept, considering you're technically fighting 2 dudes instead of 1, but it doesn't really amount to anything. Engine is the most unique of the bunch. He has 5 health bars while everyone else, including Cortex, have 3. More unique is the fact that Crash can't slide, crawl, crouch, ground pound, or even spin during this fight. Pressing either the circle or square buttons causes Crash to throw Wumpa Fruit at Engine's mech, your goal being to get enough of it in the open ports. Who knew that pieces of fruit could be so effective as a weapon? I guess the juices of Wumpa Fruit are extremely corrosive to machinery. The final boss seems really epic in concept, you chasing Cortex through space and trying to catch him before he reaches the warp gate and escapes. Problem is, it's extremely easy. Oh well, you tried anyway. The graphics are quite good for its time. Crash has been remodeled with a fresh new shade of orange, making him pop out a bit more, and his animations look less stiff than those of the first game. Cortex has been given a new color palette as well. Something that really stands out to me are the character animations. Cortex, Coco, and Brio appear to you as floating heads most of the time. Since no arms or hands are visible, the animators really had to work hard at expressing body language through the floating heads. Not only do the heads move around a lot in such a way to complement the dialogue, but there is quite a bit of expression on the faces as well. Look at Cortex's face here. Not only are his eyebrows constantly changing, but quite often his entire head goes into different contortions. This is not necessarily realistic, as it implies that he's using an unnecessary amount of face muscle, but again, if you have no arms or hands to move around, then you have to use the face itself to express. Crash's in-game animations are something to note as well. They just look more alive than before. I never took the time to mention in the first game his somersault flip animation whenever you jump anywhere but straight up, mainly because I'm so used to seeing that and I don't even notice it anymore and completely forgot that it's even there. but even that looks smoother and more fluid this time around. Not only that, but sometimes his animations change to suit the environment or situation. For instance, Crash's normal still animation is him bobbing his body up and down as if he's short of breath, and then he takes one long sigh of an exhale and then remains perfectly still for a few seconds, after which he'll go into his still animation from the first game. However, if you're in a rainy or snowy stage, he'll start shivering and blowing on his hands to keep them warm. Or if you're standing on the very edge of a platform, sometimes he'll go into this animation where he starts flailing his arms as if he's trying to steady himself and not fall over the edge. That used to freak me out as a kid because I thought he might eventually lose his balance and fall, but no, you can keep him perched there forever. He's just being dramatic. In Crash 1, he had a look of absolute terror on his face while you were running. Most of the time you were running forward and didn't notice, but it was actually quite fitting during the chase stages. In this game, he has a very befuddled and confused look on his face when running, but during the chase sections, he'll occasionally look behind him and suddenly get that brown pants look. Let me also mention that he is constantly blinking his eyes throughout all of this. Not in a particular pattern, but rather unpredictably, as most people do, although this was a thing in the first game as well, I just forgot to mention it. Crash also has a few more dying animations than in the first game, some of which are funnier than others. Also, when Crash lands on the ground, you'll often see a cloud of dust around his feet, and like his blinking pattern, the shape and size of that cloud is never quite the same each time. Crash also leaves footprints behind him in the snow stages, although these do disappear quite quickly. Also in the snow stages, you can actually see Crash's breath. I'm gonna be honest, this game has some of the best animations from a PS1 title simply because of the attention to detail. And while we're talking about animations, let's go ahead and make note of Crash's signature dance he busts out whenever you beat a boss or collect a gem. As for the layouts and backgrounds, they're more or less as detailed and polished as the first Crash game, which also showed remarkable attention to detail. There was a small amount of voice acting in Crash 1, but there's more of it this time around and it just sounds more polished. Clancy Brown now provides the voice of Dr. Cortex, who is a huge improvement over his Crash 1 voice actor. Nothing against Brendan O'Brien, he just didn't sound fitting for Cortex. Clancy Brown sounds much more appropriate for the role, in my opinion.
What is your problem, Bandicoot? I will not ask you again to bring me the crystals. Obtain the remaining 5 crystals, Crash, and bring them to me.
On a side note, if you're unfamiliar with Clancy Brown's work, let me just go ahead and say that he's quite good. Dude seems like he can just reach into the very gut of his belly and pull out some crazy voice, and I absolutely love his maniacal, over-the-top evil laugh. And let me just clarify that Brendan O'Brien is no slouch either, now providing the voice of Dr. Engine, as well as reprising his role as Embryo. Even though Engine's voice is distorted to make him sound like a robot, and he talks slower than most people, he still has enough emotion in his voice considering there's still some part of him that's human.
How do you expect to retrieve them when we don't have any Earthbound operatives left?
And his Brio voice has been taken to a whole new level with just the right amount of cackling and stuttering.
And I will do anything in my power to stop you!
Again, attention to detail. The voice of Coco is provided by Vicky Winters. She's the weakest of VAs in my opinion. She sounds too much like a 40-year-old woman than a little girl, and her delivery is somewhat underwhelming.
He's going to harness the Force and use it to power the Super Cortex Vortex he has built on his space station.
She's not terrible by any means, not like Mega Man 8 level bad, but she's definitely not great in my opinion. The music was once again composed by Josh Mansell. This game's soundtrack is a huge improvement over that of Crash 1's. The music in Crash 1 was little more than atmospheric, space-filling ambience, save for a few driving tracks here and there. This game's soundtrack tends to be much more upbeat and driving and just so obnoxiously catchy. Probably my least favorite track is the opening and title screen, as it doesn't really seem to go anywhere. It does seem to have some reference to the main theme of the first Crash game, but it just doesn't sound as defining. The Warp Room music is pretty bouncy and upbeat. Yet again, there is a creative amount of sounds to complement the music and represent the areas that the stages are set in. For example, the snow stages have a constant rhythmic jingle bell effect, which isn't necessarily the most original thing in the world, but it works. The guitar licks in the swamp stages have that classic California surfer dude feel, which really fits well with the motorboarding, although it doesn't feel quite as fitting as it would were these stages set in a more tropical location, and the percussion in the sewer stages sounds wonderfully metallic. Also, the overall feel of the music really complements the stage types. For example, the boulder stages have a pretty impending feel of urgency and jeopardy, the ruined city stages sound mysterious, and the space station stages sound like, well, they're in outer space. As was the case in Crash 1, the individual stages don't have their own music so much as the stage types. However, many of the stage types have more than one arrangement of the themes depending on where you are in a stage. Basically, each stage type has its own theme, but the bonus rounds play a brighter, more upbeat arrangement of that theme. And secret detours like Skull Root and Color Gem sections play a darker, more Jeopardy-filled arrangement. Also, every single bonus opens with the same signature drum riff. Each boss has its own theme, just like in the previous game, my favorite being Engine's theme. Ripperoo's and Cortex themes are new arrangements of their themes from the first game, which is pretty cool. There's also a new arrangement of Brio's theme that plays when he talks to you in the Warp Room, and Coco has her own theme that plays during dialogue with her as well. Problem is that you can't really hear it very very well as it's kind of in the distance and they're talking over it. If I have one complaint about the music, it's that there's no proper end credits theme. This is kind of a problem that most Crash titles share, but most of the time a somewhat fitting theme is used, like the Great Hall for Crash 1, which definitely has a feeling of resolve, and Cortex's theme for Crash 3, because why not? But in this title, the credits music is the alternate arrangement of the jungle stages. Kinda random in my opinion, but that's a very small complaint. The soundtrack is still wonderful and incredibly nostalgic to me. As you may have surmised by now, I have many fond memories associated with this game. Looking at it over 20 years later, still hurts me to say that, I would say that it has aged somewhat gracefully and is just as enjoyable to me now as it was then. Objectively speaking, I definitely think it's the best of the original 3 Crash games. It retains all of what made Crash 1 special while removing that game's unnecessarily unforgiving elements, and doesn't get too carried away that it drifts away from its basic core gameplay as I think Crash 3 is guilty of. It's the perfect balance, the perfect middle ground of the 3. I also think that the graphics and music got the most effort, the most attention to detail. From a more personal perspective, I consider this to be my favorite video game of all time, largely because of the nostalgia factor. This game blew my mind as a kid, and over the years I've never allowed that impact to fully dissolve. Basically, anytime I play this game, I think back to how cool it felt playing it back in the day. Anyhow, if you like this review, please be sure to check out my review of Crash 1 if you haven't already. I've also got plenty of other reviews for you to check out that you just might like, and I occasionally do some music stuff on the side. If any of that interests you, please consider subscribing to the channel. Otherwise, have a great rest of your day. Pieces.